I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
People need to start taking to the streets. This is a dictator.
You know, there needs to be unrest in the streets for as long as there's unrest in our lives.
Enemies of the state.
Show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
When they go low, we kick them.
How do you resist the temptation to run up and wring her neck?
The biggest terror threat in this country is white men, most of them radicalized to the right.
I thought he should have punched him in the face. I said, even if you lost, he insulted your wife.
Yes.
He came down the escalator and called Mexicans rapists and murderers. He said, well, what do you think I should have done? I said, I think you should have punched him in the face and then gotten out of the race. You would have been a hero.
I'd like to punch him in the face. I said if we were in high school, I'd take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him.
Punch some people in the face!
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump, and that's a fact.
Look as his character is stabbed to death.
Where is John Wilkes Booth when you need him?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
A Missouri state senator is under investigation by the Secret Service after saying she hopes President Trump is assassinated.
I will go and take Trump out tonight.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
And sadly, the domestic enemies to our voting system and our honoring our Constitution are right at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And that should be, everyone should take note of that on both levels, that this isn't.
What I'm taking note of is there's an awful lot of violence over on the left, isn't there? An awful lot of violence on the left side. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hopefully you guys are doing fantastic this morning. Good morning, Karen, Linda, Fred. I hear beeping. I have not the faintest clue what the beeping is, but I do hear it as well as you do. We have Colonel Joe Adams joining us in just a few minutes. It's been a while, hasn't it, since we've talked to Colonel Joe Adams. So we'll be happy to have him join us. Then I can pop over there and see what's beeping somewhere off in the corner. Probably one of my sensors has gone off somewhere around the property. But either way, a lot of animals out lately for some reason, setting off the sensors. So if you hear that beeping, it's perfectly fine. But either way, lots to talk about today. Again, Colonel Joe Adams popping in with us. Can't wait to talk to him. So much to catch up on. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about today is the increasing threat from Mexico. What is happening? We had Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum talking about potentially mobilizing against the United States. Now we have one of her heads of state talking about potentially, again, not just mobilizing, but taking back the land that was once theirs. We're going to talk about that here in a few moments. We're going to talk a lot about, of course, the violence that's taking place all across our country right now. Think about that. Protests now planned in over 1,500 cities across the United States. And these protests are becoming increasingly more violent. We found out yesterday there was a person's body found near a T-Mobile store that had been looted. We are hearing more and more reports of people being violently assaulted, even within their own ranks. Because as we talked about yesterday, some of these protesters, they come from a lot of different groups, from the Muslim Brotherhood. We have people who are there who are from the Communist Party. These people don't generally get along. We have people there from various Latina paramilitary groups, which we're also going to talk about. And at some point, these people are going to clash, not only with civilians, other civilians outside of themselves, but with each other as well. And we're starting to see that. And, there's some people out there shooting at police with real bullets. I'm going to show you a video of protesters shooting at police with a real gun, with real bullets. So this is increasing. The violence is increasing. Where these 1,500 cities are, I don't know. We're going to talk later about the Walmart connection, which we kind of touched base. One of you guys mentioned it yesterday. I didn't have time to get too far into it. We're going to talk about that a little bit as well. And my clock is off, so I'm gonna have to watch for Colonel Joe Adams joining us in. I always thought that electronic devices always kept up the time. My laptop says it's 7:28, and I just know that's not right. And let's see. Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Dottie and Kim. And Dottie says, with each beep, I'm picturing chickens being carried off. Good morning, Sherry. Well, we've had a fox running around. I've had a fox running around the property lately, and I haven't been able to get a really good look at it because I'm working and I can see it out the window, but I can't go out there. And I don't know if it's just really young. It's a small fox, but it kind of looks like maybe it has mange. So I'm going to go out there later today. I know where it goes. It's been going out in the garden and kind of laying down and taking a little nap and looking around. So I'm going to see if I can get some ideas. It's probably that fox running around. A different alarm was going off right before I started the show. So we got beeps and buzzes going off all over the place. Good morning, Tammy Jerry Hoover. And so one of the other things I want to talk about is a lot of us are asking, well, who exactly is it that's out protesting? Well, we have there was an intelligence analyst who was able to take some of the GPS information from the Los Angeles riots and decipher that by their cell phone numbers because they tell protesters to turn their cell phones off. A lot of times they don't. And so he took that data, and it's kind of surprising. Now, I don't have any names of who might be there, but we have some data that he did release as to potential possibilities of who these people might be. It's pretty interesting to know, and it's probably going to surprise you. It's definitely surprised me. It wasn't what I thought. Not names, just data of the people who are down there. So we're going to get into that as well. Just kind of waiting for Colonel Joe Adams to pop in with us. And the situation with Mexico is really starting to weigh on my mind because there is something going on with this situation. Again, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum talking about mobilizing against the United States. But what I think this comes down to is revenue, because one of the things that they keep mentioning over and over and over is that the people who live in our country, in the United States, who either are here legally or are here illegally, either one, they work. We all know this. It's not new information to us. They're out there working, however they're obtaining their resources, but they send it back home into Mexico. So what would happen if we end up deporting, let's say, a couple million people or more? That's a lot of revenue that's not making its way back into Mexico. Could it potentially hurt their economy? Is that what they're concerned about? Because I don't understand where all this is coming from and why they seem to be so concerned all of a sudden with the United States. Because you know what? We're not just deporting people from Mexico. As a matter of fact, some of them are from Mexico, but a lot of them are from Guatemala and El Salvador. We have some from Ukraine, some from China, India, Pakistan, you name it. We're deporting people from, all across the world. It's not just Mexico. As a matter of fact, the 21 million people that crossed our border illegally under Biden's term, I would say the majority of them are probably not from Mexico. They're probably from El Salvador. They're from a lot of these Central American countries. I'm going to have one of those days today where I can't talk. But either way, we have Colonel Joe Adams joining us. We're going to pop him in and hopefully get my sound right. Good morning, Kimberly. Good morning, Mary. Let's see. Oh, he's not in the chair yet. As soon as we see him sitting in the chair, we're going to be right to him. And I know Colonel Joe Adams probably has a lot to talk about today. We haven't had the opportunity to talk to him in a little bit. And I'm curious what he thinks about the situation in Mexico. I keep telling myself we don't have any real threat because Mexico would be crazy if they even thought about invading the United States. Our military, would just demolish them. I can't see that happening, but I also know they've already invaded the country. So is it really impossible or is it not? Here we go with Colonel Joe Adams. Let's see what he's got to say this morning. Colonel Joe Adams, welcome to Tabs on Tap. Happy to see you this morning. How are you doing today?
Good to see you. Do you got comm?
What's that?
Do you have comm? You can hear me?
I can hear you. Yep, we hear you loud and clear.
Okay. First of all, yeah. Hey, thanks for having me back on. I had to blow the dust off the keyboard this morning. It's been so long. So Hey,
You and me both.
you got a mangy fox on your property?
You know, I'm going to try to find out what this button. Something over here is beeping at me. But yeah, Colonel Adams, I do. I don't really know what's going on, but you know, I work sometimes in the sunroom. I work from home a lot, and I see this fox. He doesn't even care about my chickens, and he just meanders through the yard and then goes over to my garden, which is a little bit far from the house. And but I can see him. I can't see him well from over there, but well enough to know. First, I thought it was a dog, but it's a really small fox. But it's either sick or there's something going on with this fox because it's slow moving, it's
Same
friendly,
problem,
it'll
right?
come up to you.
I guess okay. I'm back on. What I did, there was a mangy fox on our property, and what I did, I went to the vet and got some medicine for that, and would put out cat food at night and put the medicine on it, and it brought him right back to life again. So and he looks real good.
Oh,
So
I'm gonna look into that.
Yeah, but use cat food. They're like cat. They're more like a cat than a wolf or something. So yeah, but go to your vet. They'll give you the medicine, put it on the food, set it out there, and that'll take care of that. So, well, I guess we need to. We can talk about the riots if you want to. I've got some information that's not readily available. You might be interested in. As far as they're arguing about Donald Trump sending in the Marines, let alone the National Guard. Well, because he's calling it an insurrection. Well, there's different categories of insurrection. I mean, civil unrest, and also the insurrection is that the president can do this is if local authorities aren't doing it or are against it. He still has the right to do that. So, you still there, Tab?
I'm still here. Sorry about that, Colonel Adams. I am listening. I'm just trying to get rid of the beeping.
Okay, I can't hear the beeping. So, so anyway, the riots. Well, first of all, I think that CNN programmed onto the Comedy Channel because they're always a bunch of clowns. So now they finally the mayor got involved and issued a curfew. So, and what have they arrested so far? 150 people, right? Okay. So this is called Kent State mentality. So what happened back in the early 70s was late 60s, had the Kent State riots, protests, and the National Guard shot some people. Well, the students were informed of the fact that the protesters that the National Guard didn't have any ammunition. Well, that was wrong. When they got fired upon, they locked and loaded. And the reason they fired on the students because the students were pelting the National Guard with rocks. And look at what's going on in right now in LA. And then you try to convince you that it's a peaceful protest. Well, tell the police that. So I mean, they're just idiots.
And they're shooting with real bullets, Colonel Adams. And I'm not talking about the police. I'm talking about some of the protesters. Later on, I'm going to show everyone a video of a protester standing behind a corner with a real gun shooting at police officers. Don't think that it's not happening. It's very violent in these areas.
Well, it just plays into Trump's plan as far as, just teach them a lesson. But, I go back when I was on riot duty, May, and they had the largest protest in history in Washington, 40,000 people. And their plan was to shut the government down. Of course, Richard Nixon was in office. And so we, the 2nd Marines, deployed, I believe, the evening of May 2nd. And we got there and we stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, waiting to go in. So come May 3rd, and what happened was the students were blocking the bridges getting into Washington, so the people who worked there in Washington. So our main objective was clear. So they sent in the National Guard to clear the bridges. That didn't work. Then they sent in the 82nd Airborne. That didn't work. And then we got deployed on site. I think it was the evening of May 3rd. And to show you the statistics now, So they say they arrested 150 people so far out there, right? Okay. Well, when the Marines arrived at the Key Street Bridge, we put 1,100 people in the hospital in the first hour. And during that protest of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, we arrested over 12,000 people. Now compare that to what's going on out there. They've arrested 150. They're getting pelted with rocks, burning cars, and they would have us to believe it was a peaceful protest. And they arrested 150. Compare that to what I did in 1971. Oh, this is great. Do you know how you transport 12,000 people to incarcerate them? Cattle cars. I don't know who. Yeah, no, we loaded them on cattle cars. And this is the first and only time that I was with the Marine platoon that the order came down, fixed bayonets. And we come across that bridge with rifles and fixed bayonets and batons, and we cleared the bridge and they opened it up.
You can't do that anymore. That violates too many people's rights.
Yeah, they take away all our funds. So anyway, don't screw with the Marines. So I actually, when we got to Andrews Air Force Base, just outside of Washington, there was a major in charge of our unit. And I asked the major, because I had one platoon, there was 3 platoons of us. I asked the major, what's our rules of engagement? Now, understand, let me backtrack one thing. We weren't trained in riot duty. A blurb came out across 2nd Marines going, if you want to volunteer for riot duty, show up at this location at Camp Lejeune and we'll outfit you. So I had no training whatsoever. No one did. We show up, they give us our gear, and including bayonets, and they sent us off to Andrews Air Force Base, and eventually we went into Washington and cleared the Key Street Bridge. So prior to being deployed from Andrews into Washington, D.C., I asked the major, what's our rules of engagement? What do we do? Because we're not trained to do this. We're just Marines. And the major looked at me kind of bewildered. He says, rules of engagement? Go in there and kick their ass. So there goes the Marines. It's true story. But this launching federal troops, I listened to a Fox commentator the other day, and he said, for the first time in history, we're going to launch the United States Marines, into LA. Well, that's not true.
Not the first time.
No, this goes back as far as I know, out of memory, as far as back as Lincoln and they used them to break up strikes. So did Woodrow Wilson. And
yeah, 92. It's not the first time.
No, it's not the first time.
And they were there in 1992 as well during those riots. Colonel Adams, obviously, and I know you know this, there's a set protest to take place on June the 14th. They're calling it No King's Day. And as of now, the list continues to grow, set for 1,500 cities across the United States. 1,500 cities. And I usually think that most of us are safe from these violent protests because they're going to happen, let's say, downtown St. Louis or, downtown Houston, etc. But that's not the case here. They're bringing it out into the communities, into the suburbs, into the, more rural areas. And I kind of fear for some of these protesters when that happens, because I tell people, stay home, don't get involved. But that people aren't going to stay home, and they are going to get involved when these people come to their towns.
Yeah, they're coming to Union, Missouri, just outside of Washington. It's scheduled. I wouldn't put too much concern with those people. But and I heard you comment on Monday's show about the Muslim Brotherhood and what they're doing, and you were right on. What you said was exactly correct. The Muslim Brotherhood is involved in these groups because it's a recruiting tool.
Yes.
Look at us. Look how we're suppressed and oppressed, and we support you, and you support us. We work together. It's a recruiting tool, and also they like and you were right. 2 points that you said was chaos and recruiting. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and not only that, but
you have chaos.
You're absolutely correct. They want us to be weak. They wanted us to be divided because that is exactly how they recruit new members. And, Colonel Adams, I know you know this, But, we have ISIS camps just on the other side of our southern border in Mexico. We know they've been training the cartels for quite some time now, a couple of years or more. And they're following in Mexico and some of these Central American countries is growing phenomenally. So of course they're here in the United States attempting to recruit these people.
Well, they're here, and all that banging the shields by the Mexican government. That's all is banging shields, because they know if they come across that southern border for whatever reason, that's our opportunity to actually go into Mexico and take care of business. So these people are a lot of talk, and they're playing to the band, playing with the band to the people. Look what we're doing, and the United States is this big bully, and we're not going to take it. Well, yeah, you will. Yeah, you will. You have no choice. So I wouldn't put too much into that. And this no kings thing, whatever. I mean, I'm telling you, this is just it. The Democrats are ridiculous. They don't even have a party anymore. They just sit around and run their mouth, and they're embarrassed. They didn't want Trump to launch the troops or the National Guard there because it makes them look bad. Well, they should have taken care of it. And he had every right to do it.
And the Democrats have lost their party. My grandparents were diehard Democrats. My grandfather, back in the day, flew his flag. He had a flag on his house, a flag on his car. He wouldn't leave home. He was a Navy veteran. He was in, World War II in the Pacific, fighting for our country. And it has changed so much. I've seen the Democrat Party, completely transition from what they once were to what they are now, to where even the Democrats I consider to be a little bit more on the liberal side, they don't even relate to their party anymore. It has just been taken over by Bernie Sanders and all of his folks.
Well, I think the quote of the week was my favorite. Was first of all was, "This is a peaceful protest. This is not what you see on TV," because the media, who works for the Democrats, well, of course they want burning cars in the background. That's to get the shot, right? So it actually plays, even though they're on the Democrat side, it plays against them, and they're trying to stop that. Well, no, you're going to get as much drama and danger as possible in the media reports, and so they're fighting against each other. But the best quote of the week is this, without a doubt. The governor and the mayor out there said that the January 6th insurrection was worse than what's going on in LA right now. They actually said that. Now,
and they're lying. They're lying. Yeah. They're saying that 5 people were killed in January 6th. That's not true. Only one person was.
Nobody died. They died after that, but I can't help them.
Well, what about Ashley Babbitt?
Well, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the Capitol Guard and everything. Yeah, poor Ashley.
Oh,
yeah. The only one to die was a patriot.
Correct, an unarmed patriot at that.
But to stand there in front of a press conference and say that January 6th was worse than this in today's world, they've lost their minds. I mean, yes, I didn't see Mexican flags or Nicaraguan flags or Honduran flags and El Salvadorian flags storming the Capitol. I saw American flags storm the Capitol because of pissed off Americans. So don't compare the two. It's a whole different ball game, and they know that, but they have no choice. But if they didn't lie, they had nothing to say.
They have to stick to their story, because otherwise they'd have to go back and talk about why they're allowing this violence to continue. Because, now we have 4,000 National Guardsmen right now in the Los Angeles area. They're being deployed in other states as well. And we have 700 Marines in the LA area. But you know what? They're not out on the streets dealing with these protesters. They're protecting federal buildings. The Marines are on standby waiting for that call if they need to be brought in to do something. And you know what? We're watching LAPD single-handedly. I think there's 17,000, I believe. Is that right? LAPD officers single-handedly trying to deal with all of these rioters, and that's because they have a governor, Gavin Newsom, who wants the National Guard to stand down. They remember when they said they weren't even going to send their LAPD officers out, and then they had no choice, and it was far too late by the time they did. And then Mayor Karen Bass or Police Chief McDonald. I mean, there are things, Colonel Adams, I would like to say, but I'm just going to stop myself right here.
They're idiots. I mean, they're super idiots. They could have taken care of this, but now understand, from the mayor's office to the police chief are the rules of engagement. Not like my major that said kick their ass. This guy, stand down, don't be, and be human targets. Now, and it goes back to Kent State. You know, there were some students there throwing rocks at the National Guard, and they got killed for doing that. Out here, they're destroying cars and ripping the community apart. Then they try and give you a map on there that this is not all of LA. No, well, nobody said it was.
Right, correct.
It's a 1 mile square area. Well, and there's a lot of people there. It doesn't matter if it's 1 square mile or 1/10 of a mile. The damage they're doing, they should be imprisoned.
And
they should round them all up. So the Marines are out there. Yeah, the Marines are stationed outside just in case they got to call them in, just like I was at Andrews Air Force Base back in '71. So we shall see.
But the media doesn't want you to know that. The media, Colonel Adams, the media doesn't want you to know that. You know, if you listen to any of the liberal media, they want you to believe that the National Guard is in the streets interacting with these protesters, and the Marines are interacting with the protesters. They're like, oh, we're scared to go to LA because the National Guard's going to get us. The National Guard is protecting federal buildings. So what in the world is Gavin Newsom even talking about? He's trying to sue Donald Trump because he brought in the National Guard and the Marines. They're not even doing anything. They're protecting federal buildings, and that's it.
Well, if somebody shoots one of the guardsmen, it could be on. So
you better believe it.
I mean, you know, even at Kent State, they threw rocks at the National Guard, and they got killed for it. Because the guards just said we were in fear of our life. We were being overran and pelted with rocks. Look at the rocks they've thrown at police cars out and the damage they're doing.
Yeah, I was talking about that on Monday. You know, they have given police multiple opportunities to use lethal force, yet the LAPD has held back. They have held restraint. How? I do not know. I don't know. And I can't believe that none of those LAPD officers have been killed yet.
No, it's a miracle, but it's not the police. It's the administration. It's the mayor's office and the governor. They're just lost in the sauce. And they don't care, you know why? Because they sit in a chair in an office dictating policy. They're not out there getting pelted with rocks. You know, the people that's calling the shots aren't getting shot at. That lies the problem. So, oh hey, and I'm also surprised, unless it's been in the news and I haven't seen it, somehow BLM is going to surface in this thing. Black Lives Matter. I'm not sure what the angle is going to be. It could be this King thing. I don't know, but they've been awful quiet, and I know they see an opportunity to get involved. Again, back to like the brother Muslimhood. I don't know what, a way. Yeah, they've got an opportunity, and they're going to take it. So with these protests that are coming up, don't be surprised if you don't see Black Lives Matter reactivated, because they've been awful quiet for quite a while.
Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, they'll be there. They'll be right in the mix of it, because they, you know what, let me start over. Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, they show up to these protests and they try to get donations from people. And I've talked to countless people, you know, back during the Michael Brown riots, who said they come into our communities and they're looking for handouts from us. We're like, we can't even afford to survive. They want our money.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Opportunists. That's all they are. So anyway, also, I want to leave you with this thought. You know, I keep a track of what I call public enemy number one. I'm not talking about gangsters. I'm talking about public enemy number one. So it goes far back as Harry Reid, and he had a very suspicious retirement. And then Nancy Pelosi, public enemy number one. Then I always said, after Pelosi, Chuck Todd. Now, Chuck Todd has since recanted a lot of his statements and his political positions. And of course, he's lost his job and he has a podcast. And so he's like a whipped dog. But the new public enemy number one appears to be Cory Booker.
Oh,
He,
he's always been my public enemy number one.
Yeah, well, he's the new public enemy number one for now. Public, yeah, he really is. So, but the classic, again, the classic line is that January 6th is worse than what was going on out there. So,
It's
so what else
crazy.
you got?
Colonel Adams, do you have like 1 minute before you go? Because I'd like to ask you about something. I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow, but I'd like to throw it out there now. Have you heard about the threats coming out of Iraq against Donald Trump's life?
Yeah.
These are very serious threats where one of their leaders has been releasing videos that said, they'll pay somebody millions of dollars to unalive Donald Trump. It's a very serious situation, I think.
Yeah, but it plays into Trump's camp, though. I mean, it's Trump sees these things as opportunities. I mean, like him going to the fights last night and everything. He is a genius at opportunities. The Democrats have to look at each other and go like, how come we didn't think of that? How come we didn't think of that? Because they can't think. They're idiots.
Right.
That's right. So the Democratic Party's turned into a class of Obamas. When Obama was president, if his policy was something good for America, actually it was bad. And what was bad for America was actually good for the Obama administration. And that is the new Democratic policy, period. If it comes out of their mouth, bad for America. So, if it's the greatest president,
funny how that is.
And what Donald Trump says, he's good for that. And I want to comment also on this Elon Musk thing. That's smoke and mirrors. Here's the bottom line. He did his job with Doge, okay? He did his job. He's done. Donald Trump, they've developed this smoke and mirror thing. Donald Trump is helping Elon save Tesla as a favor. And they're all looking at each other and squaring off like these fighters get in the ring and they stare down at each other. It's all an act. It's all an act. So
I hope you're right, but I feel like it's a very real fight.
Yeah.
Now Elon Musk apologized late at 3 a.m. last night. He sent out a tweet that said he went too far.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's smoke and mirrors. It's smoke and mirrors.
I know it's so funny how divided everybody is with their thoughts on that feud. It's like half of us Trump supporters think it's a real fight, half think, or probably more than half, think just like you that it's smoke and mirrors. I personally think it's a real fight. I don't know that we'll ever know, quite honestly. I don't know if we'll ever know.
Good chance we won't know.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Love you to death. Hi, people. It's nice to be back. And hopefully I will talk to you next Wednesday.
You most certainly will. Thank you, Colonel Joe Adams, for joining us today. We love to have you. Can't wait to have you back. I hope you have a great day. And that is Colonel Joe Adams, true patriot. If there ever was a patriot, it would be Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. Make sure you reach out to the Washington Guard. We didn't talk too much about the Washington Guard today. I think that's my brain not quite working right today, but you can reach him at thewashingtonguard.com. You can go on, look at their links and so on. We'll talk to Colonel Joe Adams a little bit more next week, find out what's up with the Washington Guard, what's going on with them. One of the things I had hoped to ask Colonel Joe Adams about, but again, I'm having mush brain from not having a show for so long. My brain's still not working right, is if they would be involved in any of their local protests. Are they going to show up and counter protest? I kind of doubt it. And Colonel Adams, if you're listening, you can comment, of course, on the comment line so we'll know what's going on. And some of the comments, Kimberly, BLM will wait until after Juneteenth is over. Kevin, Hakeem Jeffries is just as bad. Yeah, he's growing on my list of folks that I don't like. Robert, it's like whack-a-mole. Daschle Pelosi, Schumer never ends. Lisa, she's replying to Robert, then AOC, and the mouth from Texas. Jasmine, oh yeah, I can't stand that stupid Jasmine. Sherry, thank you, Colonel. Yes, thank you to Colonel Joe Adams of the Washington Guard. So happy to have him with us today. I think I had my mind so focused talking to Colonel Adams today about what he thought about the rioting that's taking place, everything going on in Mexico. I didn't even put my little ticker up. We'll get things back in order. by next Wednesday. But happy to have him on. And there is so much going on. And one thing I feel a little bit better about is that Colonel Adams doesn't think there's a lot going on to this situation and the threats coming out of Mexico. And I've had like mixed thoughts about it because again, we had Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum talking about which, by the way, how does somebody with the name Sheinbaum end up the president of Mexico? I've been very confused about that for a while now. But she's been talking about mobilizing troops to come into the United States over all of these, ICE deportations and so on. But again, that's the people being deported to Mexico is just a fraction of the people. And of course, they don't want their criminals back because those are the people we're deporting right now are the criminals. Most of these countries do not want their criminals back. Of course, they don't. Think about why this riot began to begin with. All right, let me backtrack on that. This riot did not begin because of any particular ICE raid. Now, they would like us to think that, but this is a coup that they've had planned for a very long time, but they had to wait a little bit. They couldn't do this immediately after Donald Trump took office, because if they did, it would be just a little bit too obvious. But here we have, like I talked yesterday, over 250 NGOs sponsoring some of the violence that's taking place, not just in Los Angeles, but Chicago and Houston and Austin and Seattle and Tampa. And I'm trying to think of all of the different cities I heard about. I know Minneapolis, they had some violence that took place yesterday. There is already violence taking place across the country, New York City, and 250 NGOs. Of course, they're mad because they lost their funding from the Doge audits. So of course they're upset. We have the CCP funding some of the violence that's taking place. George Soros. Well, I was waiting. I'm like, I know there's a link with George Soros. I know there is. And we talked yesterday about Indivisible, which is another communist-based organization called Indivisible. We talked about them yesterday, finding out after the show yesterday, George Soros donated $7 million to Indivisible. I'm sure he's funding a lot of these other groups. We have a lot of tech billionaires throwing some money into the pot. We have, who else? Walmart, Chrissy, I can't remember her last name, and she doesn't deserve for us to even talk about her. The heiress to the Walmart fortune. One of you guys brought that up yesterday, putting out that big newspaper ad for the No King's Day. All of these people are coming together. Don't tell me that this is about one ICE raid. It is absolutely not about one ICE raid. And by the way, that one ICE raid that everybody claims they're so up in arms about, guess what? The Department of Homeland Security continues to release information on those individuals. One was, again, I talked about this a little bit yesterday, was wanted for murder. There were child molesters, child rapists in this group, sexual predators, domestic batterers. These are the people they're claiming they're fighting for. They would be a lot better off just to say, hey, this is a coup, like they always said it was. They are trying to bait Donald Trump into taking action so they can impeach him. Now, he's a smart man. He knows this. He's keeping the National Guard only protecting federal buildings. The Marines are on standby. No one's out interacting with these protesters at this point, other than the National Guard that's protecting these federal buildings. They're standing there. They're doing their best to just mind their business until someone comes up. I saw a couple videos yesterday of those National Guardsmen being attacked as they were protecting their federal buildings, and they held a lot of restraint. They held a whole lot of restraint. Colonel Joe Adams, the Elon Musk and Trump feud is like watching professional wrestling. Thank you, Joe, Lynette, Chrissy Walton. I don't know why I could not remember their name today. Robert, heard Alex Soros is marrying Huma Abedin on King's Day. Now that would be very interesting if that happened, and I wouldn't be surprised. And Sherry, Mayorkas should be at Gitmo. Yes, and that's a very good possibility he will be at some point. And Linda, yesterday, Jamie said the cartel is behind it. Yeah, the cartel is behind it, quite honestly. And I'll talk about that. Sherry says, but we have the police backing down. They need to unleash the beast. Yeah, well, the police are backing down. That's because they're being given directives by Mayor Bass, of course, and of course from from Gavin Newsom, their governor, of course. I feel for those LAPD officers. I really do. I've met a few of them. Now some of them are liberal. It doesn't matter. You know what? It doesn't matter if you're a liberal police officer or a conservative police officer. By and large, we know that law enforcement is mostly conservative. And whether or not they support Donald Trump, I don't know. But either way, they are still our law enforcement officers. They still deserve respect. They still deserve protection. They certainly don't deserve being shot at. They don't deserve having boulders thrown at them over an overpass. And, I didn't put the video on the show today, but we only saw little clips. At least I only saw little clips here and there. But some of the things with some of these police officers, man, they were trying to kill these police officers. They were trying to kill them. Don't think they weren't. It's so obvious they were trying to kill them. And, and going back to the cartel is some of the other information being released by the Department of Homeland Security is the raid actually was conducted because this was a cartel run business. It wasn't everybody saying like, oh, it was Home Depot. That's not the case. It was a cartel run business. There were cartel members within that business, some very violent people. That's what the raid was actually about. It was not about any incident that happened at Home Depot, like people in the news media will want you to believe. And of course, a lot of these people they're arresting are gang members. And the cartels are involved in a lot of other ways, which we'll talk about also. But I wanted to get back to the situation in Mexico. Now, I'm just going to play a very small clip of this video because it's in Spanish. I know a lot of people listen to the show and can't see it, but basically this is one of the leaders in Mexico, directly under Claudia Sheinbaum, talking about, I didn't say this guy's name because quite honestly, I don't care, but he's talking about how they need to invade the United States and take their land back. So we'll play this here. Just a quick clip of it.
Cuando decía el presidente electo Donald Trump estaba 16 días de tomar protesta por primera vez como presidente, asumir el cargo. Y yo dije, si hacemos el muro, sí lo pagamos. Pero lo hacemos con el mapa de México en 1830.
Now he claims, and what he's basically saying,
en 1830. Y esto era parte
let's see
de
here.
México.
What he's basically saying is that he is going to invade the United States. He's going to redraw the lines back to where Mexico was in 1830. Good luck, buddy. Good luck. Good luck with that. And we all know that's not going to happen. And Sherry Adams says, but we have the police backing down. They need to, I already read that. Sorry. Hopefully I'm not going to start coughing. Once I start coughing, I probably won't be able to stop. I'm going to try not to. Still dealing with some lung problems, but it's working itself out. Hopefully I won't start coughing. Like for whatever reason, if I start coughing, I just cannot stop. But yeah, the police are backing down, and that's at the direction again of Gavin Newsom, the direction of Mayor Bass. We know that the mayor typically, or in some areas, runs the police department, and which is insane if you think about Mayor Bass, giving any direction at all to the LAPD. It is really unbelievable. I don't think Mexico is going to do anything. I'm glad that Colonel Joe Adams kind of talked about that a little bit because I don't really know what to think. I know that they are going to miss the revenue, of course, if we're deporting their people. If you're here in the United States illegally, if you're from Mexico and a lot of other countries, you're probably working, you're earning money, whether that is, technically legally or not. And people want to say, well, you can't legally work in the United States. And that's not true. That is absolutely not true. You can be in this country illegally and work for a company legitimately. And if you guys recall, the DOJ under Joe Biden told companies, you have to hire illegals. You have to. If you refuse to hire illegals, then we will prosecute you. We'll shut your business down. So there are a lot of companies who did hire illegals, and they did so legally under Joe Biden. So there are a lot of people in this country illegally, who are working and who are paying tax dollars, some of them, and who are sending their money back to Mexico. And I do feel like it would impact the economy of Mexico if a lot of those people who are here illegally get sent back. They're not making the same wages in Mexico as they are here in the United States. Maybe they need to pay people a little bit more over there. Maybe they need to get the economy going in different ways, which of course is impossible because the cartel takes all their money. If you own a business in Mexico, not in every area, but you're going to be paid a visit by the cartel. And guess what they're going to do? And speaking of the cartel, and Kevin says Mayor Boo Boo is totally incompetent. Yes. Yes, she is. I am not, I know my system is not good at showing photos, so I hope this one's going to pop up. Do you guys recognize this face? Now, this guy is the person seen in the truck who was bringing in supplies to protesters. He was dropping off the masks, and he was the one who was bringing in the riot gear. And it's kind of crazy to really think about it, but this guy, he belongs to a group. His name is Alejandro Orellana. He is a known member of the Brown Berets. Now, the Brown Berets, that's a radical Latina paramilitary group, and they are embedded, believe it or not, in cities all across the United States. I have never heard of this group before. Maybe you have. I have never heard of this group before. And I certainly didn't know they were embedded, across the United States. I know a lot of countries do have sleeper cells here. I know a lot of cartel members live, across the United States and operate here and run drugs and human trafficking and so on. But here we have a member of this paramilitary group, Latino paramilitary group called the Brown Berets, handing out riot gear. And these were, if you guys saw the masks that they were handing out, they were very nice, professional looking masks, exactly what you would expect a rioter to have, of course. And where does it end? Where does this violence end? What are we going to do about it? If this comes to a city near you, what are you going to do? I live in a small town. I've talked about before. I think we have about 7,000 people who live here. And this is Trump country. Where I live, this is Trump country. And I tell you what, if they come into my town, they're going to have hell to pay. That I do know, because the people around here, they're not going to put up with it. That is for sure. Not going to put up with it. I've come across very few people in this area who are not diehard Trump supporters, who are not conservatives. Yes, I'm in Illinois, but most of Illinois is diehard Trump supporters. Believe it or not, most people don't understand that, but it is absolutely true, as is most America. Most of America, look at the map, look at the red on the map, look at the overwhelming votes, legitimate votes for Donald Trump. And it's not about the man, it's about the principle. It's about the respect for law enforcement, the respect for the law, the love of the Constitution. That's what it's about, isn't it? And we're all going to uphold that. And I'll tell you what's interesting is they all want to say, oh, what's happening here is not constitutional. Donald Trump can't bring in the National Guard. Donald Trump can't bring in the Marines to these riots, but they're wrong. He has absolutely every right to do so. And you know what? If you're here in this country illegally, if you're not here legally, if you're here illegally, you don't have any rights. You don't have any rights. You might have a right to an asylum hearing, but that is the only right you have. And that's only if you make it so many steps away from the border, then you'll have a right to asylum hearing. You have no other rights at all, nothing. Our Constitution does not protect you just because you walked across our border. It absolutely does not protect you. And that is absolutely 100% the truth. So yes, deportations are legal. We can deport anyone we want. Don't think we can't. Obama did it. And who's starting riots under Obama's terms over deportation? Nobody even talked about it. So this is not about deportations. This is not about ICE. This is, just like I said yesterday, this is a coup. They are doing their best to bait Donald Trump into doing something so that they can act out, they can file impeachment papers, so that they can make everyone hate them. And they're doing a darn pretty good job. We're going to talk about it more tomorrow. But again, there was a jihadist from Iraq, we'll talk about this tomorrow, who has put the target out on Donald Trump's head. And, and I'm sure he's not the only one. There's probably so many of them we don't know. But this one has been very outspoken. And when things like this happen, you do have to worry. The day of drones, and I don't know. I hear that we don't have the best drone technology. I don't know if that's true. We've never heard why all those drones were in New Jersey and other areas around the country. No one's ever told us. Donald Trump has never told us. That's probably my only complaints about Donald Trump is A, we don't have the Epstein files. We have no idea who was at Diddy's parties, but that's an ongoing case, so I'll forgive that one. But we need the names of those Epstein files. We need to find out why those drones were here. There's a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of campaign promises that haven't come to fruition. And I know we can't expect everything on day one. I know that, but it's not day one anymore. So let's work towards those things. But either way, they want to demonize Donald Trump. I don't want to be part of that group. So, we just have to wait it out. We have to wait for the process to play itself out. I'm sure we will get the answers that we need. But in the meantime, the left, they're going to do anything they can to get rid of Donald Trump, to get rid of us. And don't let them bait you. If they come to your town, don't fall for the trap, because the first thing that will happen is your name, your photo will be splashed all over national news. And they'll say, oh, Kevin Joseph from St. Louis, Missouri was up at Keener Plaza with his American flag, and somebody, provoked him and he smacked him upside the head with his flag. You don't want that to happen. And it could easily happen to any of us. So, you know what? Just don't go. How about that? Just don't go. And Kevin says, you guys need a new governor. Pritzker is another Newsom. Oh, yeah. I think he's worse. I think he's actually worse than Gavin Newsom for sure. And then Sherry says they went into a food processing company and the owner said he e-verified them all. That's a failure to verify, not the business owner. Correct. Absolutely correct. And so I wanted to show this quick video while we're still talking about the rioting. And then I want to talk about who is at the riot. We already know who's funding it. We already know that. And there's so many people, think about this. Everybody that Doge went against and cut funding for, those folks are all funding the violence that's going to take place across this country. I'm just going to show you this clip from this video. And I want to show you, don't listen to the media when they say, oh, there's no violence, it's a peaceful protest, there's nothing going on there. Nobody's been killed. Not yet. There has not been a police officer killed yet. But if this continues on, who knows what might happen. I want to show this video at this protest. These are real bullets this guy is firing. Real bullets, real gun. Take a look. Now that's throwing out there. Oh shit! That guy had a real gun, and that's absolutely insane. Sherry says the women on The View are absolute worst. Yes, they are, and the media does have a role, like we've talked about so many times. They fuel the flames, don't they? Oh, it's so peaceful. They want people who listen to them to think it's all peaceful. And they think, oh, it's just contained in this little tiny area. Well, yes, this little tiny area, and then that little tiny area, and then this little tiny area, but it doesn't matter. There's a lot of people within that square mile of where all this is taking on. What was it? As of yesterday, 23 businesses looted, one person killed. There has been a person killed. There was a person whose body was found on a sidewalk right outside of the T-Mobile store. And I was watching some of these T-Mobile looting videos, and there was a guy I saw in a red sweater. So I'm wondering if it was him, a red sweatshirt, because the person who was killed was wearing a red sweatshirt. We don't know, yet what happened. They haven't released any information, and they probably won't, because they don't want you to know that violence has escalated to this point where somebody has died. But again, like I said the other day, look what happened during the George Floyd riots. We had 50 people that were killed, billions of dollars in businesses that were burned down and looted. People's homes set on fire, people's vehicles set on fire. Don't think that this can't get out of hand just like those riots, because if they're truly planning on coming out to 1,500 cities, and I'm sure that list will grow across the country, don't tell me that somebody somewhere in some city isn't going to take it too far, because they will. They will. And you know what? If you're like me and you have flags on your vehicle or at your house, keep your head on a swivel, because you just do not know what these people are capable of. You just don't know. And I wanted to talk a little bit about about who exactly is on the ground in Los Angeles. Linda says a Facebook friend in LA area It was on her street for a while. Yeah, it has spilled out into some of the residential areas because in a 1 square mile of downtown Los Angeles, there are residences there. Just like whenever the Michael Brown riots took place, I lived in downtown St. Louis. I had a tank parked out, in front of my building for a little while. I would leave and go to the store, and there were tanks on the streets and curfews. And it was a pretty crazy time. I didn't personally feel scared or anything because I didn't feel like they were going to harm me, but they were out, they were burning businesses. They burned down a 7-Eleven in St. Louis City that was vital to that community. They had nowhere else to get for groceries for people who walked or didn't have a way to commute. But that's exactly what they do. They harm their own communities, which makes absolutely no sense to me at all. Oh, I live here. I'm going to go out and protest and burn down some buildings. But you know what? Typically, though, it's not people who live there. And so there's a guy. His name. I'm going to make sure I have his name down. I've got notes everywhere. His name is Tony Saruga. Not sure if you've heard of Tony Saruga. He's an intelligence expert. What he did is he was able to pull the GPS data in LA downtown, right in the center of these riots. And it's kind of interesting what the GPS data showed. Again, his name is Tony Saruga. He said out of all the devices he tracked, 309 of these tracked devices are linked to ultra wealthy homes worth over $10 million in areas like Brentwood, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Malibu, Palo Alto, and cities such as New York, Seattle, Maui. 79% of the people that he tracked, he didn't name any names. He knows what their names are. He didn't tell us the names. 79% of the names that he tracked to be right in the middle of these violent protests, he said they have private planes. Not surprising, but it might surprise you though who is at and who is taking part in some of the violence, because you know what, they all have masks on. You have no idea. Oh, Billy Gates could be down there himself. How would we know? He'd have a mask on. We would know who he was. Probably poisoning everybody with his protein insects and worms and fake meat. We just don't know. But I did see something interesting. I don't know if you guys saw this on some of the video of some of the fighting that was going on, the violence in downtown Los Angeles. There was a hot dog cart. Did you guys see that? Here we have all these people protesting and screaming and yelling and throwing rocks at police. And you have this guy over here selling hot dogs off of a hot dog cart. And I thought, what a great idea, because these people are out there, they're protesting, they're hot, they need water, they need food. I mean, why not, right? I think maybe I should grab a hot dog cart myself and head down to the nearest protest. I thought that was pretty darn funny. But yeah, we don't know who's at these protests, but it doesn't surprise me at all that some very wealthy people, probably some well-known names, are down there. Tony Sergota did not mention again any names, but he did track the cell phone data. He has a good idea who's down there. But think about this. If he can do it, so can the police, of course. So when they go back and tell you they can't make arrests, they don't know who these people were, it's all lies. They know exactly who is there. They know exactly whose cell phone is there. That's why, like I said yesterday, they were throwing out those pamphlets that said, turn your cell phone off. But these people, I hate to say it, but most of these people who are out there rioting and protesting, they're not exactly the sharpest tools in the shed, right? So they're going to leave their cell phones on. Their data is going to be tracked. But are they going to come after them like they did the J6ers? Because if you recall, on January 6th, not only did they have GPS data, did they have cell phone tracking data, but they could use facial recognition to identify somebody literally by their eyes. You couldn't even see their face. All you could see was their eyes. And they were able to identify some of these, not the guy that had the BOMB, that placed there. We still have no idea who that was, right? But we know who everyone else was. So we'll see how it all plays out if they start making arrests, if they start tracking these people, because if you have cameras on your home, I would keep them on. I'd make sure you have some cameras on your home. You just don't know what's going to happen, what's coming around the corner. I think that the violence is going to increase. I think that Donald Trump will put a halt to it. But this is the violence that we always talked about, that we knew was coming. And again, they can't just start out as soon as Donald Trump takes his seat. They can't just come out in the streets and protest, because that'll look bad on Democrats, wouldn't it? they have to wait. They have to give it a little time. This is not about ICE. It's not about the ICE raids. This is about weakening America. It's about chaos. It's about division. All of these people throwing their money into the pot. And I hope we out every single one of them, including old Chrissy Walton from Walmart. Now, in an area like where I live, I would love to go out and tell every single person in my community, don't go to Walmart. Walmart's the only store where I live. We have a Walmart and we have a Rural King. And, well, there is an Aldi. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to do my best, my absolute best, not to step foot in. I know it's not easy because I buy some of my gardening stuff there, but I can find a way around it. And you should too. Do not help these people. Do not help these people when they use their money against us. I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I remember canceling my Amazon subscriptions, back in the day. I know it's not easy, but we just have to protect ourselves. And Matt says, hey, Gemini Pam. Dawn says, do they have private drones? I haven't heard a lot about drones yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. And let's not forget the threat that drones pose. There's a lot of things these days you can do with a drone. We saw it play out just recently between Russia and Ukraine. They can cause a lot of damage. They can be armed. They can be equipped with biological weapons. A lot of uses for drones these days. So don't take that too lightly. And Dottie says cell phone batteries were suddenly drained on January 6th. I know, interesting, right? D says hot dog cart, perfect opportunity to make them go home. Just put laxatives in the food. Oh my gosh. You know what problem is, D? I don't think these people would go home. We already see them defecate all over, cities like Seattle and Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. I don't think a lot of these people really care. Quite honestly, I don't think they care. And Sherry says there's more to the military parade. It's previous. Soros is marrying on the same day. How do you gather them all at once? Who do you think will attend? Well played. You know what, Sherry? You might be onto something there. I didn't know anything about this wedding. I had no idea. I had heard rumors that they were a couple, Huma Abedin or whatever her name is, and Alex Soros. We'll see. They probably think themselves as royalty, like a king marrying a queen to, bond within their countries. In this case, within their terrorism. So we'll see how things go, day by day, we'll see how things play out. We'll see what happens tonight. Every night, things escalate further. Every single day, the area widens where we're seeing these violent protests every day, new cities, people being bussed in from all over the country, being bussed into these different cities to cause chaos. They're being paid to do it. Don't say there's not pallets of bricks, pallets of rocks, etc. around these cities. Don't say that their people are not handling out riot gear. They absolutely are. These things are all true. And we'll get to the bottom of it. We'll talk about it a lot more tomorrow. But either way, that's it for me today. Hope you guys all have a really good day. Thank you to Colonel Joe Adams for joining us today. Can't wait to see you guys all tomorrow. There will be so much more to talk about. So I hope you guys, again, have a good day. We'll see you then. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs